Hello and welcome to Castle Talk, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the new book, Quest for the Nautilus, Young Captain Nemo. Lorcan Finnegan originally studied graphic design and moved into motion design and later animation and now live-action filmmaking. His supernatural short, Foxes, premiered at South by Southwest and screened in competition at Tribeca and picked up an IFTA for Best Short. His first feature film, An Existential Folk Horror Without Name, premiered at TIFF and Vanguard in 2016. We are here talking about his new film, Vivarium, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2019 in competition at Critics Week and won the Gann Foundation Distribution Award. This movie, first of all, welcome, Lorcan. I'm so happy to talk to you about this.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be talking to you.
So the movie stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, and it is about this young couple, very delightful young couple, who are looking for their first home together, and they wind up in what I can only call an episode of the Twilight Zone. They wind up in a neighborhood of identical lime green houses that they and it's a suburb that they cannot escape. And there's so many ways this movie works, both as an allegory, as a science fiction film, whatever. But what I'd really like to hear from you is having said what I said, and you can throw in whatever else to explain more. But with Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots just dropped into a cookie cutter weird suburb that they cannot escape. What did this mean to you? What's going on here?
Yeah, well, it started out as we made a short film, which you mentioned there in your intro, Foxes, in 2011, which was sort of a reaction to what was going on in Ireland, socio-politically, the landscape. There was like a big economic boom, and people started building these housing developments all over the country, sort of in the middle of nowhere, commuter suburbs, and there was a lot of greed involved, a lot of backhanders. Banks were then offering 100% mortgages, and a lot of young people ended up sort of buying into these developments that were very heavily advertised, with ridiculous sort of slogans like, saying things like "your life will be beautiful from here on in," when like people holding asparagus and couplings and stuff like that. The spirit of gracious living was actually one of them that was just up the road here. But so then the crash came in 2008, more or less, and a lot of these places left empty. So there's a phenomenon here that was called ghost estates, where there's massive housing developments that were either completely empty, but finished and very surreal. The builders, owed the bank loads of money and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of them just pulled a runner to go and live in Spain and stuff like that.
Of course. And
but sometimes there was like 2 or 3 people just living in these vast empty places, and they built all the houses exactly the same to just try and squeeze, and using a kind of fractal pattern to squeeze as many houses into an area as possible and just try and maximize their profits. So yeah, we made this short film that was set in a real place in Carlow in Ireland. We kind of extended it a little bit digitally, but it's about a couple who are living in one of these places, and the girl in the film is trying to escape by rejoining nature, basically. And nature's kind of encroaching onto this place. So there were some ideas and themes that we're just sort of touching on, and even through making the film, through research and scouting and just finding the film while making it, started getting us interested in exploring some of these themes on a much more universal sense in a sci-fi way. And I think that's what led us to we started thinking, like, what if one of these places actually just didn't end, it went on forever in a kind of a weird quantum trap. Right. And we started thinking about what it is that young people are really afraid of. Are they afraid of monsters under their beds or jumping out of cupboards? Not really. It's not very plausible. There's something more existentially dreadful in your hopes and dreams kind of getting crushed, your life turning into routine and being trapped with a massive bank loan, and things like this are actually what freak people out. So we started thinking about what kind of monster could represent this in a movie. And like Godzilla, as a representation of atomic energy and Japanese being afraid of what that might bring. I remember at one point while we were working on the story, we watched this documentary about the life cycle of the European cuckoo, David Attenborough, BBC doc. And that's what brought us to Martin, the estate agent, being this brood parasite monster for our time, representing all of the sort of capitalist, consumerist greed
there's
for our generation.
In fact, with Martin, which I don't want to spoil the ending at all, but the other people who interact with this young couple, I love how elegant this movie is, in that there aren't very many characters in it, such that it's almost a really wild stage play, but the strange people that are introduced to them, you have them not only think about it allegorically. Young couple, they wind up in this cookie cutter house. They are in something they didn't know that they were getting into, which is sort of a version of what you were describing with the 2008 collapse. And then now into their life comes a baby. And just like in Eraserhead by David Lynch, what that really was about is a baby comes into your life and can be a monster. And this baby that comes into their life is a screaming, alien, unconsolable monster that they nevertheless are slaves to, in a sense. And I mean, it's do I have that right? Is this an allegory for if you're a young married couple, you might get stuck in a house with an alien screaming baby?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, the film kind of broke down into three acts. And each of those was like youth, middle age, and old age, basically. So in the first act, everything's quite hopeful. They're funny. They're having fun. Middle age, they have this baby turn up, and then their lives are kind of controlled by, manipulated by this child, and they end up arguing about stupid stuff. And then old age, where they regret having spent their kind of middle age arguing about shit and coming back together. So the kid turning up is like he's not theirs. That was what was sort of interesting to us. It's like, if he was their child and they're sort of forced to raise him, obviously there's parallels with the real world and life and parenting and all that. But he's not theirs yet. He wants them to be kind of surrogates. So he's manipulating them and using them to get what he wants, because they're only part of his plan in a way.
Yeah. So let me ask you something about the. I know the film is coming out on the 27th, and I mean the world. You posit people plopping into a world that looks completely unrecognizable, and it's kind of coming out into a world that is almost unrecognizable to what it was 10 days ago. Like when we first set up this interview, there were not deserted streets because we weren't all like stuck inside. How do you feel as a director right now with any director releasing work into the world at a time when people are definitely stuck at home with their TVs, but the streets are deserted? Are you feeling anything unusual?
Well, yeah, it's very unusual. It's weird, and particularly with Vivarium, because it's weirdly prescient. It's like there's a couple in basically self-isolation with a child who doesn't seem to be affected by an illness that is starting to affect one of them. And there's that scene with there's a book that has this symbol of a weird kind of virally thing above an illustration of a man and a woman and an extinction thing on their foreheads, and it's all very weird. But I mean, that sort of thing happens. It's more likely that a weird thing like that happens than doesn't happen. It's like our collective unconscious is what makes films. And maybe they're used to get through things, on a weird level. I don't know. Yeah, strange. And then Vivarium is weirdly fitting for now, in a way. People want to, their own lives would probably seem a lot more comfortable than Tom and Gemma's in the movie. But it's more like the next films, like the films that we're working on now, will they, do you have to kind of talk about that the whole coronavirus thing has happened in scripts. Do you know what I mean? Like, we don't
Oh,
really
yeah.
know what the landscape is like. You know, maybe if you have a scene of someone going through an airport, you'd have to go and rewrite in that there's some sort of temperature body scanners and some sort of like nasal swabbing going on. Who knows, like, what sort of measures be introduced?
Boy, that's a really
after
solid
all
question.
of this, or when the after all of this even is.
Yeah. Because if after all of this is only
So
like
it's,
6 or 8 weeks.
strange.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I
go-
was just going to say, yeah, we just don't know. And we don't know how long it'll be. And also, we don't know what, like, you know, Garrett and I tend to work on stuff that we find, you know, the things that may be going on sociopolitically that are kind of bugging us, and then it'll inspire us to work on a story that explores these ideas. But will they be relevant ideas after all of this? I don't know. You know?
I think
so. Yeah, it's weird.
I think they're going to be. I think like they'll continue to be relevant just because, you know, these are universal themes. So even if people stay off the streets for 18 months, you're still going to be wondering, what is the purpose of my life, and what are these children that have come into it, and are they really mine, and why am I slaves to them? You know, that kind of thing. But you're right. I mean, those are creative questions. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say we're working on a project that's more about sort of targeting fast fashion industry and exploitation of the East by the West, and you know, it's, you know, it's sort of anti-capitalist, I suppose, anti-consumerist in certain aspects, but it's a supernatural thriller.
Yeah.
But you know, will worlds have changed significantly enough that actually we're not importing really cheap clothes from India and Asia, because it may have coronavirus on us.
It could change. Some of those things could change. I don't know what the world is going to look like. You know, we've had about 50 years now where it used to be, when our grandparents were living, if you bought an umbrella, you bought one umbrella and it lasted you for 40 years because it was a really good one and it was expensive.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so if you had less money, you saved up until you bought one, right? And then we've lived for the past many decades where umbrellas are cheap, everything comes in, and now we may very well shift back to a time when things are more expensive and we have to value them more. And I don't know, there will be good and bad things about that. I don't know how it's going to affect art, but it's going to be fascinating. Gosh,
I don't think it'll all happen really quickly either. I don't think it'll be all like wrapped up very neatly in a year either. So I think a lot of these sort of, you know, changes that are sort of necessary for humanity will probably start to come into effect, but they'll still take, you know, maybe a whole generation
I agree
before
with you.
The world is kind of a neater place. But so in some ways, maybe it's more important to be making those kind of films at a time when people are resetting a little bit and can actually change the way we live.
I'm so glad that we had a chance to talk about this, because I saw this movie and I watched it and I really liked it, and I think it's really well done it's really perfect for the time. And also you throw in the specials because they listen to A Message to You, Rudy. So just all told, this was a perfect sweet spot. Lorcan Finnegan, thank you so much for talking to us about Vivarium. The film comes out March 27th. It stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots. It is a frightening and often really hilarious film. Thank you, and good luck with it.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole. Bye.
Bye.
All right.